What if the diagnosis that scared you the most was never meant to become your identity? So many people are handed a label, a lab result, or a scary prognosis, and in a moment, everything changes. The way they see their body, the way they think about their future, the way they make decisions. And too often, they're never taught to pause and ask deeper questions. Today, I'm joined by Autumn, known online also as the Alternative Rebel, and the host of the Know Better, Do Better podcast. After being told that she had a deadly hepatitis C diagnosis, Autumn started questioning what the testing actually meant, how these labels are made, and why fear plays such a huge role in modern medicine. If you've ever been handed a diagnosis or a label that made you feel afraid of your own body, this episode will remind you that your future should never be decided by something you were never taught how to question. Welcome to Faith Over Pharma, the podcast for women who want a different way to heal. I'm Susan Gladstein, holistic health practitioner and functional nutrition specialist, and here we explore faith-led, holistic approaches to hormones, energy, and symptoms that just keep getting brushed off. If that's you, you're in the right place. If you're starting to question the things that you've always been told about your health, or you're realizing that the things mainstream medicine has told you to do have only made things worse, you're not alone. So many women get to this place where they've done everything right. They followed the advice, tried the supplements, trusted the labs, pushed through the symptoms, and they still feel like garbage. And too often, instead of getting real answers, they're just made to feel like it's all in their head. They're tired, their hormones are off, their symptoms don't make sense, and deep down, they know something is being missed. That's exactly why I created the Rooted Reset. It isn't another protocol to follow or a long list of things to add to your already full plate. You've already tried that. You don't need more information. You need the right information in the right order and in a way that actually fits your real life without all the overwhelm. So if you're ready to stop spinning your wheels and start feeling like yourself again, head over to susangladstein.com. What if the most dangerous part of a diagnosis isn't always the condition itself, but the identity shift that happens the moment you're told you have it? One word, one label, one quote unquote deadly diagnosis, and suddenly you stop seeing your body as something God designed with wisdom and start seeing it as dangerous, broken, contagious, or even beyond repair. That's exactly what happened to my guest today, Autumn. She was handed a label that changed the way she saw her body overnight. But instead of letting that label decide her future, she started asking questions most patients are never taught to ask. How are these diagnoses actually made? And what is the testing really measuring? And how much of what we have accepted as medical certainty is actually built on assumptions that we were never allowed to question? Autumn, which I love, is known as the Alternative Rebel, and today we are going there. So I would love to just kind of dive into, take us back to that moment when you were given this deadly diagnosis, and what exactly were you told, and how did it change how you saw your body overnight?
Yeah. Well, Susan, first of all, I want to thank you for doing all that you're doing here on this podcast, because I fully believe that people need to awaken and become aware. I believe many people are under just this delusion that, there's only one path to health, and unfortunately, it's through medications. I don't know how they justify that, but the narrative is strong and the sheep are all headed one direction. And when everybody's headed one direction, many people just follow. But thank the Lord that I've been on a journey that has woken me up, and I am here to hopefully wake up the listeners as well. And to Jesus be the glory for this story. It has been quite the process. So yeah, 2021, getting routine blood work, and like many people do, I wouldn't say I had any real symptoms. I felt fine, but I get labeled with what they said was a deadly virus living in my blood. And I remember thinking, my gosh, like you have someone else's labs. Like they've mixed up the labs. These are not my labs. And because it was particularly hepatitis C. And for those that don't know about hepatitis C, it's one of the most extreme viruses in how you have to live a certain lifestyle, oftentimes druggies, shooting up, promiscuous lifestyle. And that's like the last, I'm like the last person on earth as to, someone that could have this. So it was very suspicious. They also say people can get them from, or get the virus from uh, tattoos, blood transfusions, and intercourse is questionable. But even that, my husband and I, we've only been with each other, and I got him tested afterwards. He doesn't even have it. So none of the things apply. Okay. I'm like, I go to a Facebook group and I'm like, okay, I have hepatitis C. And I go in there and it's like, yeah, these ex drug users. And I'm like, Lord, what is happening? Like, how did this happen to me? Did someone come in and like stab me with a needle in the middle of the night? Like, what is going on? So it was this obscure diagnosis that came out of left field. And at first, I let it take me down. I went into an identity crisis. I'm like, how do I even have this? Who am I? Do I even know who I am? And Satan used it to almost take me down until I finally composed myself, kind of got my wherewithal about me, and planted my feet on the ground in the Lord. And as I knew to be true, because I actually walked through this autoimmune disease that years prior I ended up curing naturally with a holistic doctor. And that's actually, that experience is what set me up to believe and to trust and to know that my body was made to heal. And I needed to not take the allopathic medicine route with this obscure diagnosis, at least not right away. I considered, okay, if I need to take this medication at some point, is going to be the last resort. Basically got my labs redone to make sure that this was actually my diagnosis that they were claiming. And sure enough, it came back positive. So really no explanation. I did proceed to see a gastroenterologist, and he informed me that the cure for this condition is an $80,000 medication. Oh, but the medication has a black box warning, so you might die on the medication. This is the doom and gloom and the hopelessness of allopathic medicine or mainstream medicine. And it is the place that so many people are caught in, this undercurrent. I don't know what to do. And we make decisions out of fear. And I never recommend making decisions out of fear because we don't make the right decision. And fear causes us to lose that disempowerment. We lose our faith in like turning to the Lord and seeing what can happen. And we put all of our trust into science, into allopathic medicine. And we must remember, science is not 100%. There is no medication that is 100%, no vaccine, and everything comes with risks. And so we need to navigate with wisdom. And we need to slow down and stop responding out of fear. And in my opinion, stop being so trusting of these tests and these diagnoses that we're being labeled with. And essentially, this story is what has now woken me up. And I've been on this like mini podcast tour with a doctor, in that what I found was that they're not at all finding a virus in my blood. I thought they were. And I believe this is the next wave of awareness that's coming. More and more people are waking up to the viral narrative. But basically, There is no isolated hepatitis C virus that they have found in my blood. I believed that. And if I would have continued down that path, who knows where I would be or where my health would be right now. But this realization changed everything. And I know this is not something easy for the average person to challenge, but I did and I have. And here we are sitting together talking about it.
And I can relate so much to that. I had a adverse reaction to the anthrax vaccine before I deployed in 2019, and I lost my health as I knew it overnight.
Mm.
And I was afraid to even speak up because I knew what the cause was. But in the military, you just do as you're told. You get the vaccine, you go on the deployment, you go question everything. So I was at, 18 and a half years, very close to retirement. And so if I was to speak up and question or say that I had issues from that, my career could be over. And that fear, the fear is real. I mean, I think we saw a lot of that during 2020 and how that can really, I mean, I honestly, that's just of the devil. When people get in your head, or when the devil gets in your head and makes you question God's plans for you, his love for you, any of that is from the devil. And I love the quote on your website that says, you can't beg God to heal you and stay loyal to what's killing you. Like I read that and I was like, amen, sister. I mean, fear is such a powerful, powerful driver in health decisions. And that's really what I hope to shed some light and give that faith aspect when it comes to our health and knowing that God wants us well. Like he didn't think after he created mankind, like, oh, shoot, I left something out. I'm so glad that man has come along. Now, I will say I've had four babies thanks to a C-section. I have used mainstream medicine to bring in life. I've also been given some really terrible advice as far as, breastfeeding my child and low blood sugars and needing to, sweep him off to the NICU and all of those things. But what did it look like for you to move from fear-based decisions into more of like a stewardship-based health?
Mm. So, really, what this journey has also done is it's opened my eyes to God's design of the body and symptoms. So, in my case, I mean, there's so much to get into because I mean, with the viral narrative, and maybe we'll get there. But in my case, most people with hepatitis C, they don't really have any symptoms. Okay. But we know many other illnesses and diseases come with symptoms. So, how I've been how I've been positioned and how I've learned to now view symptoms is completely different than where I was. And it takes all the fear out of it. And I think when we view symptoms and look at them as a fear, more of a fear-based narrative of my body's broken, it's in trouble, and we start to fear the very body that God magnificently created. Every cell, every organ was made by him. And we lose track of the power that is within the body. God made our bodies to adapt, to overcome, to heal. Symptoms are essentially, they're our friend. They're the messengers, or they're actually part of the healing process. So if we look at this as like a runny nose or diarrhea, what is the body doing? Okay, so the virus narrative, and this is why I have a big problem with the way now I'm seeing this all shake out. I have awakened to the virus narrative in general because we believe there's floating contagious particles that are out to get us. And that distracts us from actually getting curious about what's really going on in our health. Why do we have a runny nose or diarrhea? Why are we coughing so much? These symptoms are the intelligent design of God Almighty. And our body is protecting us. So, like I said, if we have a runny nose, we have diarrhea, our body's trying to expel something. That's beautiful. We should say, like, thank you, body. Like, you know that something needs to be dealt with before I cognitively, realistically know anything is wrong. And so, the same thing, we look at inflammation like around your knee as like a bad thing. And inflammation actually is the body trying to attempt to heal. And so instead of getting curious and looking at what's going on with my body, why do I have this chronic cough? We run to the doctor, we take a medication, and what if you're breathing in something in your home that's toxic, or drinking something that's in your tap water that's giving you all these symptoms? But yet in reality, you are just running to allopathic medicine for a medication to shut the symptoms up. And that's where the medication that they want me to take, I have come to find out with this hepatitis C situation, most people would say, oh, it helps get rid of the virus. It does not. First of all, there's no virus that they actually found and isolated ever when it comes to this. But, and I have many resources. We need to make sure I need to bring up these resources for people because I am not the doctor. I am not the scientist to speak academically about this. But where was I? So, but the medication, it basically causes my liver that is expressing elevated enzymes. It causes it to shut up, to stop doing that. And when we stop a cough or we stop a runny nose, we're interfering with God's design and how he made our bodies. I heard a doctor, Dr. Tom Cowan, he's one of my favorites. He talks about how, somebody has a cough or bronchitis twice a year for 20 years. And they go and they take the medication or they take an antibiotic and they suppress the cough. Well, then you get lung cancer 20 years later and you wonder why? Because you're not allowing the body to do what it was made to do. And so I'm not sure if I've fully answered your question, but basically I have been able to step out of the fear narrative. I believe we've been trained and inundated and it's been ingrained in us that allopathic medicine gets to tell us that these symptoms are bad. And when they're grouped together, they get to label you, put that label on you of illness and disease. And then there happens to be insurance codes attached to that they get to make money off of your symptoms. And in reality, you've never once looked at the food you're eating, the water you're drinking, the air you're breathing, your emotional health. We're missing all of that. And we're just jumping to medications and missing the root cause. And so it's like the fork in the road where it's like you either believe in allopathic medicine and you choose that route, or we turn towards God's design and we know and we trust and we actually can have gratitude in that moment that my body is trying to heal. It's trying to up and overcome something. There's symptoms going on. What's going on, body? What do you need? And so that puts you in a place of stewardship, of curiosity, of honoring God and how he made us, and not trusting in science. Because as I said, and as I will say time and time again, science is not 100%. There is also one thing I want to say in that, diagnoses, they have a false positive rate. There are people out there, there's a false positive rate for every type of cancer out there. So there are people out there that are being diagnosed with cancer that actually don't have cancer and going through treatment. Some people maybe even dying from the treatment. But because we are so trusting in science and medicine, there's a Bible verse, Proverbs, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. And when medicine stops being questioned and it starts becoming a verdict over your life, and you let them speak life or death over you, which essentially they were going to be speaking death over me if I didn't take this medication. How many people are falling prey to this in the system? This is a real problem.
Oh man, I was just having a very similar conversation yesterday about cancer in particular and thinking about how shifting how you view how the body works instead of it being like, oh, these things are out to attack me. No, the body is brilliant. Same with fevers. Like that's the thing,
Yes.
every mom with their young child is like, my heart is breaking because they have fever. And yes, it is very uncomfortable. But like even the narrative on what is high and scary is not even accurately like it's kind of a false outlier that yes, okay, in medicine we have to kind of err on the side of caution because of lawsuits and whatever, which is also why you get all of this negative. I had a friend that was diagnosed with liver cancer, a very rare liver cancer, and they basically just said, sorry, there's nothing that we can do. You just are going to have to wait it out. Like, that's horrible. And as somebody who's a believer, like, yes, we all have a 100% chance of dying. And yes, our days are numbered and we don't know. I know where I'm going after this, but I'm going to make the best of what I have while I'm here. But being around people, even being in those groups where everybody is just their identity is in their diagnosis. And I talk about this a lot that it's hard to heal if it's part of who you are. And God didn't intend for that. You think about like, I'm of the opinion now that tumors are the body's defense mechanism to wrap up whatever the body is trying to fight off. So when you have people going in there and cutting these off, cutting them apart and letting all of that stuff leak into your body, I'm sorry, but you're just asking for more problems when you do that. I had a place on my leg, a mole that was, probably the C word. I don't like to label it because I don't even want to put that in there. And
Yeah.
I started treating it naturally. With this stuff, it just eats the tissue, the
The
nasty
black
tissue.
salve by chance?
It is. And
Ah,
it
love it.
leaves the rest. And
Yes.
so I had a big hole in my leg, and my sister-in-law was like, aren't you scared? I was like, no, like I'm not putting any of that juju. I'm getting rid of it. Like the Lord's given me this amazing thing. And it's actually very incredible to watch how quickly my body has healed. I've done 2 treatments. It took all the junk and left all the tissue. And yes, I have, some scarring in there or whatever, but like I know people that have people just cut and cut and cut and cut all over, and there's a different way. And if you go and look that stuff up, there's so much out there. Like, do not do this, you're gonna die. Like, I've never seen, I mean, there's a lot out there that like is against a lot of the natural stuff, but this is like beyond insane of how much they attack black salve or bloodroot,
Mhm.
whatever you want to call it. But I mean, I think it is so important to educate and switch that narrative and be around people who are not feeding into that negativity. If your doctor is like giving you this horrendous prognosis and basically speaking death over you, like that is not of the Lord. Like it is not. Um, and for somebody who's like hearing this, who's never really questioned a diagnosis before, what are they assuming is fact that actually might be more complex than they realize?
Mhm. Can you say that last question again?
For somebody who's kind of just like never questioned a diagnosis before, they just kind of like, yes, this is what I do, like I did, salute smartly and move on. What are they assuming is kind of what are they assuming is fact? What the doctors are telling them that might actually just be a little bit more complex. I mean, even understanding how the body works is a huge change than just thinking everything's. I mean, you can get into the virus stuff, because that I am with you in understanding and researching that they've never really isolated a lot of these viruses that we came to fear, especially like in COVID. And that was my thing, that I was thankful for my vaccine reaction, because it led me down this whole rabbit hole of studying all of that and actually how do vaccines work, to the point where I was like, I'm never getting one again. And when COVID came around, I was like, this is ridiculous. You're telling me that it's going to mask the symptoms, and there's a whole population of people that have it and don't know it. Like, what about that makes any sense? Like, literally, do you just go around and, yeah, I'm not going to go to work today. I feel great, but I'm probably sick. Like, that makes zero sense. And yet we all just, not all of us, bought it. Like, as a society, as a world, it was like, yep, this is how it goes. Like, that's insane to me.
Yeah. So as far as labels challenging the narrative, the difference really is complying. Are you going to comply to what the doctor says, knowing that you're completely ignoring the root of the issue? The body isn't broken, it's communicating. Or are you going to take the opposite route of actually taking ownership? Most people, maybe not most, but some people out there, they don't want to take ownership. They don't want to change their diet. They just want the pill and the quick fix. And hey, that's fine. Like, each person, their own. I mean, it's their own life. You get to walk out your life however you'd like. For me, I would like to walk out my days feeling great and good as God intended. And unfortunately, in today's day and age, that requires us to be a good steward, because there's so many toxins and poisons everywhere. So when it comes down to tests, first of all, tests are not 100%. And I had Dr. Sam Bailey, her and her husband, Mark, which they're actually believers. They became believers during COVID. But Dr. Sam Bailey co-authored a book called Virus Mania. And she says that there's one germ that equals one disease, that equals one test, that then equals one treatment. It's like a marketing funnel. And so if you want to be sent down that marketing funnel, by all means, go ahead. You know what to expect. But for the person that doesn't, let me continue to further your knowledge with the germ and viral theory. First of all, germ theory is basically a refuted hypothesis. It has never been proven. Germs have never been scientifically proven to cause disease. And we know that there are naturally occurring things out in nature. So this is a little bit into the terrain model of health. When you listen to someone that has this terrain perspective, they compare a lot of our bodies to nature. And I see it, I mean, some of these people obviously aren't believers, but I see it as a beautiful correlation, because God made us and God made nature. And, fungus in nature has a purpose, and it overgrows and takes care of certain aspects on animals. Like, certain funguses and parasites live on animals and live on trees, etc. Right? And so when fungus becomes prevalent in us, it's for a reason, okay? And I'm not saying that it's a good thing for fungus to take off and overgrow in a person. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that it actually is part of the coping mechanism that God has built within our bodies. Our bodies are meant to cope and adapt. And so these symptoms that we experience, that, oh, this is bad and that is bad, and we want to get a medication and get rid of that. We're missing what our body is actually doing. And unfortunately, it's going to cause us long-term problems, because when we silence the symptoms, like I said before, it suppresses what's actually going on that we need to be paying attention to. So into the viral narrative and the testing narrative, they're picking up on virology, specifically with antibodies, etc. They're picking up on proteins. And as Dr. Tom Cowan also says, when the body gets poisoned, the body can start to break down. And there can be proteins present. And just like Kary Mullis himself said before he mysteriously passed, he was the creator of the PCR test. He said, do not use this test to diagnose anything. It picks up on any and all things. And so, yet that became the very test, and they could turn it up or turn it down. It's sensitivity of how much it's picking up or how much you want it to pick up. And essentially, every test is just that. You have to find the balance in science of the fine dividing line of how much is too much that you're picking up, and then what is normal and what is okay. And we know that even with routine labs, the normal range for blood work can vary by state and even county. I don't know if you're aware of this. What's normal for blood pressure and all those things. Back in the South, apparently they have higher levels of a normal range than, say, states and counties across the country that are healthier, because the average population, that's the normal range. And it's like, okay, hold up. Like, mainstream medicine, they so quickly adjust things and they skew things, as I'm seeing, and just they're so for me, let's get into my story here because I know our time is running short, but essentially what they're doing, let me get to the heart of the viral narrative. You would think for me that they could take my blood, and if there's a virus replicating all over the place, because that's what they say, like that's what's going to kill you, is this virus is replicating and hijacking your cells, and it's this intercellular parasite, etc. You would think you could take my blood and find it everywhere. It's got to be everywhere, right? No, that's not exactly actually how it works. And the definition of isolation doesn't mean that they're isolating one particle from the other variables. In science, no, they have tricky definitions. And you would never know this, because when they say they isolate a virus, they don't find a virus and remove it from its environment. They actually add things to it. It's like the opposite of what isolation means. So in much of our virology, and in my test, I had to do this for the sake of myself. This took 3 years. Okay. I'm not saying that every person's going to come to this conclusion right away after hearing this, but I challenge you to go look into the viral narrative. There are papers out there. Dr. Sam Bailey, Dr. Mark Bailey, he has the Farewell to Virology paper. Dr. Sam Bailey has a YouTube channel where she breaks down all the illnesses and gets into the science. And these doctors believed in viruses prior to COVID. It was COVID that woke them up. They started looking at the science. They realized, wait a minute, they're never actually finding a virus and correlating that with disease or symptoms. In fact, that's never been done. And in fact, they discovered a virus decades before they even made or invented the electron microscope. So how can you discover something that you've never seen? You don't. You just make up the fact that, oh, there appears to be contagion happening. So we assume that it's a floating invisible particle that's smaller than bacteria or fungus that we can't see. So therefore, we're going to call it a virus. And then you look up the tobacco mosaic plant virus. That is what the whole foundation of virology is built on, is this whole plant experiment in which they did no controls. And it's totally pseudoscience. But yet virologists don't go back and look at this. And the average person certainly doesn't. And these doctors admittedly said, we never challenged the narrative, but yet all of this is hidden in plain sight. So back to my blood, they take my blood, or if they're testing for a virus, this is roughly what they do, little variation for each type. They take it, oftentimes they will starve it and dehydrate it. Then they will add dyes and then monkey kidney cells, oftentimes, and then an antibiotic, that's particularly susceptible to kidney cells or detrimental to kidney cells, I should say. And then, Susan, then they watch the effects of what happens with my blood. And essentially, the cytopathic effects that take place, they say, oh, these cytopathic effects, that was caused by a virus. And when I first heard that, I'm like, wait, excuse me? What? That's not science. And when I looked into how they even discovered hepatitis C to begin with, once again, they're not doing science. Their own definition and their own standards and protocols that they claim need to be required for science, they don't do them. And I know this sounds crazy because who am I to come on here and say this? But I'm telling you, there's doctors, there's researchers, there's ex-virologists that have actually come out and said, this is pseudoscience. This is not true. We are not doing science, and therefore a virus has never been isolated and found to cause disease. And the last thing I'm going to say, then I'll pass it over to you, is many people say, okay, well then, what are you saying? I'm not sick? No, we're not saying you're not sick. We're not saying you don't have symptoms, but we're challenging the narrative, because if a virus has never been shown to cause disease, and it was, quote, discovered before it was ever able to be, quote, seen, and then the finding of a virus, which was the tobacco mosaic plant, which they claimed was a virus, but literally they never found a virus. They just basically poisoned a plant by grounding up the particles of like 200 other sick plants and injected it. It's always these unnatural means that they force upon the substance or the plant. So my blood is not undergoing dyes and antibiotics and dehydration in my body. So we take the thing, or back to the plant example, we take the plant out of its natural environment and we do abnormal destructive things to my blood or to the plant, and or in science, in the lab, in the tissue, and we cause it to be dead and dying tissue. We're no longer working with live tissue or the actual situation, the God, our God-made bodies of what's naturally occurring in our bodies or in nature. We're not observing a virus. It's like they're causing effects and then claiming it's a virus. And when you think about this, it falls right into the agenda that I believe Satan is very much using to keep people in bondage. And when they can claim that the floating invisible particle is out to get us, or we have become victims due to these tests where they have picked up proteins in our blood after they've done these 5 to 12 steps to destroy whatever it is that they're testing, they have us right in the palm of their hand. And just like they said, just like we talked about earlier, fear is the ultimate deception, and it disempowers us, and Satan knows what it does. And if he can keep us living in fear and disempowered, then that's ultimately where he wants us. And that is exactly why I am here speaking out against the narrative and challenging the narrative and begging people to wake up and take charge of their health and wake up from the illusion that the pharmaceutical companies and the men in the white coats and allopathic medicine have our best interest at heart. They do not. They are not here to help you with your health. They are here to make money for the pharmaceutical industries, and it is not in your best interest to always listen to them, but challenge what they are saying.
Ooh, mic drop. I think that I mean, that was kind of a thing for me, even with like the Hep B and the vaccine that they give babies. Like, that was literally just based off of someone's theory that if they vaccinated all the babies, they could reach the high numbers of homeless population that was dealing with Hep B. And it's like you're giving your newborn baby 600 micrograms of aluminum within hours of birth based off of somebody's theory that if we just got everyone together, we would solve this homeless. I mean, that's just insane to me when you think about that. And it was even funny because when the COVID test, it talks about that. And when the COVID test came out, like we were able to get positives from testing orange juice. And I mean, they had those things where it was like they were testing plants. So yes, I definitely questioned the validity of the test. Everybody, like, I couldn't go to work based off of it. And I refused to take the test. I just, like, yep,
Same.
I did it. Here it is. Like, whatever. I guess if you wanted a day off, you could just put it in some orange juice. But I mean, that whole thing really, if you stop and think of it instead of just going along with it, it the Lord will give you discernment, I think, and the path forward. But if you were looking back now, what do you believe God was really showing you through this entire experience?
Well, so I'm still walking through it, believe it or not. My liver enzymes are they're coming down slowly but surely. I started off actually going to see all these holistic doctors. I traveled throughout the US. I was doing all these holistic modalities to kill a virus. And what I found mostly was that it kept backfiring. I was, at the time I was taking all these labs and trying to figure out, okay, what is my liver doing when I do this? And what is my viral load doing when I do this? And the viral load, I don't know if anybody has ever um, done as much lab testing with hepatitis C as I have, but the viral load will literally jump thousands, like crazy. I mean, within a couple weeks, they'll drop thousands of numbers and they can jump thousands of numbers. So it's very interesting because depending on what the machine is calibrated to, and or maybe what holistic modality I was doing, because I did a lot of harsh detoxes and things, and it was just basically creating more trauma on my body for these tests to pick up on. So I found that the my body is more responsive to holistic, natural calming modalities. In fact, I ended up connecting with a Christian brain rewiring nervous system coach, and she is absolutely incredible. And she has seen so many people overcome health conditions by simply learning to calm your nervous system and address past traumas, etc., in your life. And I've been working with her, I think it's almost been 2 years. So her and things like Bowen therapy, which is incredible therapy. It's an Australian modality. It's very calming to the nervous system, to the fascia. I've been getting osteopathic work that has really done allowed me progress leaps and bounds in the right direction. So what I am ultimately learning is surrender to the Lord. I know that I know that I know now. I've looked through everything. Like I said, it's taken me 3 years to stand firmly in this, to be on podcasts and say, I know there's not a virus in my blood. I know that. And thank the Lord I didn't take a medication that was not actually going to address that, even though they say that it does. It just forces my liver to shut up, and that's not helping the circumstances. But I'm leaning in, I'm listening. I've learned so many things. I've grown an awareness about myself. I was working way too hard prior to this diagnosis. I was not, even though I knew how to live a healthy lifestyle, there was so many things that I was ignoring and not tending to. I was not stewarding my health well, my emotional health. I had a couple relationships in my life that needed to be addressed. There's a book I want to have the author on. It's a Christian book. It's called Forgive to Live. And, there's something I want to say this because I feel like someone out there needs to hear this. There's a quote that someone said that, let me see if I have it. What you are eating might not be as important as what is eating you. In other words, mentally. And so that's another thing I've realized is like, okay, our mental and emotional health very much play a role. And so, all that said, I have a greater awareness. I have more of a dependence upon the Lord, unlike ever before. I trust his creation. I am amazed at the body he gave me. I know I have gratitude. I know that my body is only trying to do its best and to protect me or to address something. And so it's a process of me figuring out what is that interference? Is there something in my water? Is there some sort of unresolved anger that I need to address and get rid of? Because liver is said to be more like your angry organ. Um, it's taken me on a self development journey that unfortunately few get to go on. And now I am so grateful. I would be stuck in that old way of living, in that old life, if this wouldn't have been the thing that allowed me to wake up and not just wake up to myself and take on a new form of stewardship and a new form of dependence on Jesus, but also wake up to the scientific, mainstream medicine model and be here to proclaim and maybe even be a whistleblower type to encourage people to look deeper, to not be so trusting. And as I continue to say, to challenge the narrative.
Oh, that's so good. And definitely right in alignment with the things that I'm constantly trying to like foot stomp in my episodes. And even just thinking about like when you were talking about, oh, they have like monkey liver that they put in the testing. I mean, wouldn't it now if you believe we came from monkeys, which as a child I always thought that was silly because why are there still monkeys if we came from them? They would all be people, right?
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be, couldn't it be true that if your body is getting these things that are not natural to you and your human body, that it would protect itself and fight against that? So, yes, it would make sense to me that if they're injecting this into your body, that you would see elevation in another area. Anyways, that was just like, well, of course you would if you understood really how the body worked. And I think you could dive into that with any kind of diagnosis, really, to question what's going on. But I know somebody's listening. I know you mentioned your podcast, so I want to make sure that people can find you on your podcast. Tell us all the things where we can find, and I'll make sure it's in the show notes, but I always like to say it out loud for people who are driving.
Yes. Well, thanks so much for having me. AutumnMcLees.com is my website. And I do have a 30-minute free kind of strategy call where I get on with people. And, a lot of people need someone to brainstorm with. I'm not there to give medical advice. That's not something I can legally do, but I certainly give them some things to think about. And there's different modalities and different aspects of health, like holistic dentistry versus conventional dentistry. I mean, I don't know if you've gone down that rabbit hole, but like what happens in our mouth also can correlate to so many diagnoses or so many problems, health problems. So sometimes the average person isn't thinking about those things. And so you and I, we have this like greater awareness of like, have you thought of this? Have you looked at this? Do you have amalgam fillings in your mouth? You know, whatever it may be, there's all sorts of things that can correlate back to what's happening with the person and trying to lean in and think about what the body is struggling with or what the body is trying to say or up and overcome. So that's the strategy calls. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, autumn.mclees. And I think that's about it between website and, Instagram. People can find their way to, the podcast, of course, Know Better, Do Better. I'm on all major platforms. YouTube is out there as well under my Autumn McLees, but we're a little bit more behind on the videos in that regard. So, but yeah, thank you, Susan, just for all you're doing. I'm so grateful to have you as a team player in this realm. We really need to come together and continue to share. And I believe this is the Lord's work. I really do. There are people caught in the undercurrent of the medicine model, and Satan is just having a heyday with it. And so we need to call people into ownership and into this awareness.
Amen to that. And I thank you so much for just being bold, because it definitely is not easy to challenge all the things that we've been taught and know. But if somebody's listening and they're holding a diagnosis, or maybe they feel like whatever's going on is defining their future, what would you want to speak over them today?
Well, the difference in taking ownership versus just complying. And it's so very important. Do not ever make decisions out of fear. Freedom begins when people stop accepting labels as the final authority. And wisdom participates in health, it doesn't outsource it. Proverbs 14 says, the prudent gives thought to his steps. And so, you have to believe healing is possible. And through the Lord, we know anything is possible. You have to believe you can get well. And so part of that is guarding your heart, guarding your mind from these negative proclamations over your life and your health. Because if you believe that you are a victim, then you will become one. And so continue to stand in that truth and know these things. And of course, walk every step out with Jesus.
Amen. Yeah. And I think that's also so important to just really evaluate who you're getting your information from. It's one thing to go to the doctor and be given negative information, but if friends and family are speaking death over you, like, I realize that's a very hard boundary to set, but I don't believe that we were meant to do life in isolation, but definitely having a community who's speaking life and encouragement. Sometimes that's what we need, right? That's why we're all here. So thank you so, so much. This was amazing. And there's probably 1,000 things we could go down rabbit holes on. So we'll have to do this again.
I love it. Thanks so much for having me, Susan.
Thanks for listening to Faith Over Pharma. If this helped cut through the noise, share it with a friend who always asks, do you think this actually works? And if you're ready to go deeper through immersive retreats, phototherapy, or the Rooted Reset, you'll find your next steps at susangladstein.com.
Thanks for listening.